Algebra 1. We're ready to move forward in our lessons today. We will be picking up where we left off last week in Chapter 7, Section 5. We're going to finish up our power rules today, and you need to be on page 442 in your books. You need to have note paper and something to write with, or my handouts that I have sent you, and let's dive in. As you can see on my board, I have our first example there. Today we're going to be talking more about how we use division with these properties. And so you'll notice inside my parentheses, I have x divided by y. I have a quotient. But I can still raise a quotient to a power. And I call it a quotient because remember that a fraction bar is division. So that's what's happening here. Division is happening here. And we're also raising it to a power. So if I have this example of x over y quantity cubed, I know that that means it's x over y multiplying it by itself 3 times. So if I wrote it out in expanded form, I would see that this equals x cubed over y cubed. Now you probably would have guessed this property based on everything that we've been learning over the past couple weeks, but this is the last one that we need to tackle in this chapter. And the algebra behind it is, anytime we have a fraction or a quotient, a division problem, being raised to a power, that means I raise the numerator to the power and I raise the denominator to the power. It's pretty simple. So 2 examples that you can see in your book and also on my board is, what if we had 3/5 cubed? Well, I know that I would raise my numerator to the 3rd power, which is 27, and I would raise my denominator to the 3rd power, which gives me 125. I can see it with just variables, similar to what we started with. If I have x divided by y, quantity raised to the 5th power, that means I'm going to raise my numerator to the 5th power and my denominator to the 5th power. Pretty basic and pretty simple. So let's do some easy practice problems using this property, and I'm going to bring up my next board. And this is following along in your books, and we are on problem 3. Okay, so our first one to apply is this one. If I want to simplify this, I need to recognize that inside my quantity, I have z to the 4th divided by 5. I want to raise that entire quantity to the 3rd power. So what that means is I need to raise my numerator to the 3rd power, and I need to raise my denominator to the 3rd power. So we need to remember the other properties that we've also been learning here. If I already have a power inside the quantity and I'm raising a power to a power, I need to remember that rule from a few days ago, and I'm going to multiply those. So I get z to the 12th as my new numerator. In the bottom, I just have the number 5. So 5 cubed is 125. Now at this point, obviously I would need to double check to see if there's anything that I can clean up or simplify, but in this example, there isn't anything. So I'm ready to move on to the practice problem. And you can see that on your note handout or in your book. And so I want you to pause this video and attempt this one on your own. And then we'll rejoin and go over it. So if you are here again, that means you've done this problem on your own. And we're just going to quickly go over the answer. In this problem, I have 4 divided by x cubed, all being squared. That means I need to square my numerator, which gives me 16, and I need to square my denominator. And again, just like in our example problem, I already have a power being raised to a power. And so I know that the property for that means I'm going to multiply those powers. So I will get x to the 6th in my denominator. So my final answer is 16 over x to the 6th. There's nothing more I can reduce or simplify or clean up. That's my answer as it stands. Okay, I'm going to clean my board, and we're going to talk about something interesting that happens when we are raising a quotient, fraction, to a negative exponent. We're going to study that and come up with a shortcut understanding for those situations. So I'm going to just use variables here. And say, well, what if, again, we have a quotient or a fraction being raised to a negative exponent. Now, we studied negative exponents way back in our first lesson in chapter 7. And so we know that if we have a negative exponent, what we do is we kick it to the denominator and make it positive. If we had one in the denominator, we move it to the numerator and make it positive. We're going to apply that rule a few times here. Based on the property we just studied, if I have a quotient or a fraction being raised to a numerator, that means I raised to a power, excuse me. Both of these are being raised to that power of negative n. I'm going to go ahead and raise my numerator to that power and my denominator to that power. And we see that both my numerator and my denominator now have a negative exponent. Well, I need to apply that rule separately here, but both times. If I have a negative exponent in my numerator, that means I move that to the denominator. Same thing though, if I have it in the denominator, I move that to the numerator and make it positive. So another way that I can look at this final answer is that I actually raised the inverse of my original to the positive version of that exponent. That means I can actually, once I recognize this situation happening, I don't have to go through all of this work. I can just know that means I flip my fraction and make my exponent positive. I can go straight there. Instead of having to do each one of these steps, I can go right there if I want. Now, if you forget this shortcut, you will still get the right answer by applying your power rules in separate steps. That is obviously fine, but we always love to see shortcuts in algebra. So if I have a fraction being raised to a negative exponent, flip my fraction, take the inverse of it, and then the positive exponent, and then continue through simplifying according to our properties that we've already studied. So let's try that one. In your book or in your note handout, this would be problem number 4. Now let me clear my board and write these on here. And again, just like our first problem, we're just going to do one practice problem. So I'll get them both on the board right now, and we'll dive in. Okay, so in our first example, problem 4, I see that I have a fraction happening here. I have a quotient, meaning I have division is going on there with my fraction bar, and I'm raising that entire quantity to a negative exponent. I'm going to apply our shortcut that we just talked about, and before I even start cleaning this up, I'm going to flip my fraction and change this to a positive. So my new problem looks like this. I'm going to have y to the 4th in the top and 2x to the 6th in the bottom, which then makes the power that I'm going to raise that quantity to a positive 3. Now I can apply today's lesson, and that means I'm going to raise my numerator to the 3rd power and my denominator to the 3rd power. So this one's a little bit more complicated than the last ones that we did. I'm going to move this up so I can reach. Using my power rules from last week, if I have a power being raised to a power, I know I multiply that. So in my numerator, I will have y to the 12th. In the bottom though, notice that we have a few things going on. We have a 2 that needs to be cubed, and we have an x to the 6th that needs to be cubed. So 2 cubed is 8. I'm going to solve that in the same step. And then x to the 6th raised to the 3rd power means I multiply those exponents and I get this. So my final answer for this problem is y to the 12th over 8x to the 18th. Of course, I would look to see if I could reduce or simplify, and I can't. This is as simplified as it can get. I want you to pause the video and try this second problem here. Remember our shortcut method of how to deal with a fraction being raised to a negative exponent, and attack that one on your own. And restart it when you're ready to talk about it. Okay, just like our first example, I'm gonna go ahead and use my blue marker to apply my shortcut, noticing that I have a fraction being raised to a negative exponent. So I'm gonna apply the rule that means I flip my fraction and make my power positive. So that means my 5b will be in my numerator and my a is in the denominator. And instead of raising it to the negative second, I'm gonna raise it to the positive second. So then I will use today's rule or property, and I'm going to raise everything in here to the second power, and I'm also going to raise my denominator to the second power. So 5 squared, I know what that is. That's 25. B squared is b squared. And in the bottom, I'm going to have a squared. And that is our final answer. Again, I can't simplify, I can't reduce, I can't clean it up any more than it is. And that is my final answer. Okay, that ends today's lesson. Wrapping up our properties and our power rules. You will see in your note handout and on RenWeb what your suggested book problems are to do to get you prepared for Khan Academy. You can head over to Khan Academy, and there are actually 2 assignments scheduled for today. And there weren't too many problems that I could find there for this, so please make sure you're doing some in the book too. Remember that Khan Academy may not be as hard as what I will require of you. So take the time to do practice problems from your book and then head to Khan Academy. You'll see on RenWeb that there are 2 assignments there for today for Khan Academy. The first one is called Powers of Products and Quotients. The second one is called Properties of Exponents Challenge. I do want everyone to try that one. That one takes a lot of the things we've been learning, maybe asks them a little bit differently to make sure you are really understanding this. I do want you to attempt that one. The first one is normal. That one, I expect to see a grade of 70% or higher. But the second one, give that one a try. And if you do not accomplish 70%, that is fine. I do want to see everybody try it though. Okay, that ends our lesson here. Another heads up is to know that we have one more lesson that we're going to cover in our next video in chapter 7. And then that's the end of chapter 7. And we will be ready to move on to our test, which will happen later this week. Don't worry about what the details are. I will be covering those in our Zoom class on Tuesday. So just keep working strong and steady through this, and I will see you in our Zoom class on Tuesday. Have a good day.